Okay, again, welcome to Purpose of This Book with David G. and David G. And tonight we are on page 98. Where the heck is my little... Oh, I lost my spot. So give me a sec here, guys. Bottom paragraph. David, did you want to set up anything, how we got to this point? Or do you
No,
want
I
me to...
think we're okay. Just for the simple fact is, we're still talking about working with the new guy here, and it's just a different subject now. That's all. This all flows. It's just different topics about the same thing about us working with our proteges, our candidates, our sponsees.
Okay, so this is page 98 in chapter 7, Working with Others. And it's the third paragraph, full paragraph. Here we go. Now, the domestic problem. There may be divorce, separation, or just strained relations. When your prospect has made such reparation as he can to his family and has thoroughly explained to them the new principles by which he is living, he should proceed to put those principles into action at home. That is, if he is lucky enough to have a home. Though his family be at fault in many respects, he should not be concerned about that. He should concentrate on his own spiritual demonstration. Argument and fault finding are to be avoided like the plague. In many homes, this is a difficult thing to do, but it must be done if any results are to be expected. If persisted in for a few months, the effect on a man's family is sure to be great. The most incompatible people discover they have a basis upon which they can meet. Little by little, the family may see their own defects and admit them. These can then be discussed in an atmosphere of helpfulness and friendliness.
Excuse me.
All right, you got anything, Abby?
Yeah, I do
Cool,
have
cool.
principle, which is a fundamental truth or law, a basic doctrine or rule. Persisted is continuous and lasting, and defects are a lack of something needed for completeness, a blemish, or a fault.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. You want to go first, David?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Bill starts us out by saying, now with the comma, the domestic problem. So here we are. I'm going to make light of it, and I don't mean to make light of it, but Bill's pointing out the obvious here. Just the same way as he did on page 78 in the second paragraph. Most alcoholics owe money. Most of us have domestic problems. Whether we were married, had a partner, lived at home with mom and dad, lived with someone else, we still had domestic problems. And then he makes a statement: there may be divorce, separation, or strained relations. For me, check every box. When your prospect has made such reparations, so we're talking about reparations to repair the damage that's done, making amends. Amends means to meet change. So the change that I'm looking for is to let them know all the harms that I did to them in a reparation. And also then to ask them, is there anything, how can I make these wrongs right in your life? And then also ask them, are there any other harms that I've done? I need to clear the table. I need to know all the truths about myself so that I can get free of this. Amends is part of me having that spiritual experience, and then me saying that spiritual experience is 10 and 11 and 12. So then it says, when your prospect has made such reparations as he can to his family and thoroughly explain to them what new principles which he is living. We are living these principles for the rest of our lives. I am committed to doing this for the rest of my life. And the principles we're talking about are the 12 steps, 12 traditions, 12 concepts, right? These are all principles, all 36 of them. Putting them into practice in my life, studying them, working with others all the time, and living is a different way for me than what I had before. Back on page 25, one of David's favorite pages in our book, in our text here, on the bottom of the page, it says well, we had two alternatives. One is to go on the bitter end, blotting out the conscience of our intolerable situation the best we could. The other is accept spiritual help. I had to remember that. If I think I'm going to blot out the consciousness of my intolerable situation, meaning that I'm at odds with my wife or my boss or life in general or my bank account or the government, IRS and all these things, or do I accept spiritual help? I need to live by these spiritual principles in my life. And when I live by these spiritual principles in my life, when I live in the disciplines of 10 and 11 and 12, when I live there, my life is pretty darn okay. Do I fall short? Yeah. But the nice thing about that spot check inventory in 10 is allowing me to live in the moment. And then it gives me the what at, watch, ask, discuss, amend, and turn. And I'm grazing over it real quickly. I don't want to take up too much time on this. But those spiritual principles, and then when I forget, I got page 85 of the book so that I can do my nightly inventory, so that I in case I've missed anything, right? And I do that, or 86, I'm sorry, 86 of our book, or my nightly inventory. So I go constructively through review my day. Was I resentful? Was I selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do I owe an apology? These are me living by my spiritual principles. And then one thing about that is, if I don't know really what the principles are, keep reading the book, keep studying the book. Because as we keep going through this thing, we are going to point out to you principles of success. Principles of success that I learned from Howard and Kathy, things that they did the work. There's 70 of them, by the way, in the following 3 chapters. And I'll point them out as we go. You know, and I think they're fun. I think when we look at the chapters and who they're written to, I flip the script on it, so that I can have so these are the principles by what I have to live. My wife doesn't need to change anything for us to be okay. Nothing. I need to change. And when I change, others around me change. So this is me practicing the principles. And then it says, he should proceed to put these principles in action at home. That is the toughest place. That's why the next 3 chapters, to wives and family afterwards, and the employers, those are the 3 hardest places for me anyways to practice these principles in all my affairs. The third challenge, it's a challenge, the third part of the 12th step, the hardest 3 places. Why? Because nobody's watching me. See, I think I must be Casper the ghost for something. Like, nobody can pay attention to what I'm doing. I'm just sneaking in and out of rooms, and I'm assassinating your character. I'm being sarcastic. All those things need to change. And I don't have the power to change them. But if I take these principles in my life and I diligently look at them, and I ask God to remove these defects of character in 7 as he does, and that's a process that I can do in 10 all day long, because really, what is it? 4 through 9 is steps 10 and 11, right? So, and then it talks about, back to our book, that is, if he is lucky enough to have a home. Yeah. I circled the word lucky. I don't know if it's lucky, or you want to call it grace of God. Why not grace of God? You know, because there's been many times in my sobriety where things have gone rough, and I didn't probably practice the spiritual principles in my life, or it didn't come to my mind, or especially early on in sobriety. And the grace of God got me through situations. I don't have one off the top of my head. I was trying to think of something today, and I just couldn't come up with anything. Know what we're going to read tonight. But call it lucky or call it grace. And I know that grace can run out. See, God won't do for me what I can do for myself. So I got to be awake to these things. And I am awake, not sleeping and dreaming awake anymore. Then back to the text, though his family be at fault in some respects, he should not be concerned about that. I am the stock in trade. On page 64, the first paragraph. So if you guys want to flip back to in our textbook into the 4th step. First paragraph. So this is about my shortcomings, my fact finding, and my fact facing process that I'm going to go through in this 4-step inventory. And I'm going to point this out, and then I'll go back to the original text that we're talking about tonight. So it says, first full paragraph. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. So personal inventory is different than our 10-step inventory, right? It's personal. And the other one here, I'm including other people in it in 10. This was step 4, a business which takes no regular inventory. And this is the metaphor that Bill's using. Usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact finding, so mind searching and fact facing, a fearless process. Fearless is an effort to discover the truth. Moral, that's the word moral means. About the stock and trade. Who is the stock and trade? I am, not my family. I'm not taking their inventory. I stay on my side of the street. One aspect is to disclose the damage, my flawed thinking, that's the damage we're talking about, or unsellable goods. This is a process. And then it's to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values, about truth, being delusional. I need not to be delusional about this. Again, my family may need spiritual help, but this thing, as we keep reading on, it's going to talk about, well, I'm just going to read it. He should concentrate on his own spiritual demonstration. What is the demonstration? Paige was on here about a month ago, and someone asked, what's traction? What is attraction as opposed to a promotion? And Paige used, I think, a great description. It's a demonstration. And Bill used the demonstration throughout the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. What is my demonstration? And am I practicing these principles in all my affairs? If I asked my children when they were younger and they live with me, am I treating mom okay? They would tell me the truth, and they did it one time. I asked them, and I wasn't doing a good job, guys. I'm coming forward right now. I had to change everything. I had to go to God, and I had to be awake to this thing. You know, sometimes I was short. Sometimes I was fault finding, and I needed not do that anymore. She's a child of God the same way as I am, but I needed to treat her like that for all, especially for all the things. That is the amends that I make, is change. And this is argument of fault finding to be avoided like the plague. In the first edition said like leprosy, plague, leprosy, whatever you want to call it. Avoid it. Bill is giving us a description here of how to be in disagreement and not be an argument. I can disagree without being in an argument with someone, right? And David maybe give this example, so I'm not going to steal it, but about how to go about doing this in the moment and bring God into the situation. And I'll just bring up one other one. I was listening to Katie and Charlie Parker a long time ago when Charlie was still alive, and Katie was talking, and she was talking about that she got her hair done. She came home. Charlie was reading a book in a chair, and she thought she looked really good, and I'm sure she did. And he didn't pay any attention to her at all. And he's like, "Hey," she's like, "Hey, dude, just got my hair done. How about a comment? How about some kind of a, acknowledgement that I'm looking good?" And he goes, "You know what? Can I ever redo? Go back outside and come back in." And so she went back outside and she came back in. And he goes, "Oh my God, look at your hair. That is spectacular. I love that." Then he called all the sponsees up on the phone, and when we went to a meeting, they all gushed over her too, right? The point of that story for me is this. My wife's not an alcoholic or a drug addict. She can have a glass or a half a glass of wine, whatever she chooses to do, because she has choice. She listened to that with me one time. And we got into a disagreement, which was going to turn heated. And she says, "Hey, can we have a redo?" We don't know what those tapes do, what this is doing here for someone else in their life, especially when we're practicing these principles out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, how it can change other people's life. And we practice that on a regular basis now. We don't get into heated arguments. We just don't do it. We catch ourselves. The right thing to do is say, "Hey, this is getting a little heated. Let's do this another time." No fault finding. There's no need to be doing that. Over to page 99. I'll try to wrap it up so David can talk here. The bottom of page 98, the last sentence, it says, "In many homes, this is a difficult thing to do, but it must be done if any results are to be expected." So that's a must. Must do that. So circle the word must, if you will. And it's a practice. The more I practice something, the better I get at it. Like I'll be awake, not asleep, like awake to this whole situation. And if persisted for a few months, the effects of a man's family is sure to be great. So if I practice this, if I do this on a regular basis, it is going to change the relationships in my house. It is going to do that. The most incompatible people discover they have a basis upon which they can meet. Little by little, the family may see their own defects and admit them. I'm still waiting for that. No, I'm just kidding. It's just a joke. No, she does that quite. Dude, that's on tape too, isn't it? That's bad. All right. These can be discussed in an atmosphere of helpfulness and friendliness. Last thing I'm going to say about that is the opposite of arguing and fault finding. Helpfulness and friendliness. Go ahead, David.
So that's a pretty nice deep dive by David there. I'll just sort of underscore a few things. So as this paragraph opens, it's just taking this domestic problem, the possibility of domestic problems head on, that there could be divorce, separation, or strained relations. And then, so the transition that Bill's making here is, all these things are possible. Now, it could be none of them, but in most cases, in many cases, at any rate, there are going to be things like this. And what was the point that Bill made a few different times just in the paragraphs prior to this? Remember, just a few paragraphs earlier, we're saying, the men who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. And then a couple paragraphs later, he said, he clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for, and goes on to say, job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence on God. So dependence on us as the sponsor of the step guide, or dependence on our wife, right? Or our husband to be like, oh, please forgive me and take me back. That's still human dependence. It's still human reliance, right? So now as Bill gets into this new content, he's saying, okay, let's just recognize for many of us, there's going to be domestic problem. Could be divorce, separation, or just strained relations. I'm sure in 100%, fine, 99%, there's going to be at least strained relations. We know what we did to the people around us, right? That's not a stretch. So when your prospect has made such reparations, sort of payments back to damage as he can to his family, and thoroughly explained to them the new principles by which he's living, he should proceed to put those principles into action at home. What does that mean? It means, okay, yeah, so I have to thoroughly explain, because our loved ones are going to think we're crazy, right? Or this is just the latest thing that we're on to. It's just another in the long line of, new directions we were going on, or self-help, or whatever garbage that, or tomfoolery we were pursuing before. So we do need to explain it, but then what has everybody who loved us grown tired of? Blah, 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 all of our words and explanations. So I need to put these principles into action, right? Just like our chapter says, into action, not into explaining and re-explaining and re-explaining or promising. Explain and then be in action, right? It's a microcosm of everything I'm supposed to do in recovery, which is to be moving, right? Because if I'm not moving, like if I'm in water, I'm probably going to sink. So I got to keep treading water is the minimum, but I need to be moving forward, moving towards land, right? So if I'm lucky enough to have a home, David talked about that, and those family may be at fault in many respects. I'm not concerned about that. I don't care. It does not matter what was going on. This is not about me trying to change my external circumstances. This is about me working with God, developing a better relation with God to fix the stuff that's inside me, right? I can only concentrate on my own spiritual demonstration, because two things are going to happen by this. Number one, I'm going to get better if I'm in action and I'm demonstrating these spiritual principles. And then number two, guess what else is going to happen? I'm going to get some credibility back with the people around me. Because if you were like me, the person you are today is very different than the person you were before, right? I am 180 degrees different in my head, my heart, and my gut, and therefore my actions as to the man I used to be. And so I get some credibility back with my family at a minimum, right? Maybe I get back into the home. Maybe I do have the opportunity to repair those relationships, but it doesn't happen if I'm not a demonstration. And then maybe something even more glorious happens, which is maybe my family is like, oh, wow, this change in you is amazing. Tell me more about it, because maybe I want to do this too. And whether they do it in Al-Anon or Nar-Anon or one of these other Anons, great. Maybe they're just going to figure out how to otherwise grow their own spirituality in a way that works for them, but they may be impressed by our demonstration. So it's just about me. It's not about arguing and fault finding. It's funny. It's so appropriate. So I'm traveling, and I own a business, and I'm out here with a handful, like 10 other business owners. We sell this software, and we're out here for the software that we all sell, meeting with the executive teams. And it's like, at this tipping point in our relationship where I was afraid things weren't going to go well. And I prayed and all that stuff. It was day-long meetings, and everything went really well. Everything went really well. And I said it was cool. I was prepared for bad, but everything just worked out great. We all said our piece, and we worked out a solution. And David's like, yeah, because argument and fault finding are going to be avoided by the plague. Now, everybody else in that room, are they all spiritual beings? I don't know. But for my part, I didn't start any arguments. I didn't point any fingers, right? And the whole group, we worked together. This is such a great way to go through life, right? In many homes, it's a difficult thing to do, to keep my mouth shut. It's not about the home. It shouldn't say in many homes is a difficult thing to do. It should say for most of us, this is a difficult thing to do. It's not about the home. It's about us, right? It's about me. But if persisted in for a few months, the effect on a man's family is sure to be great. Those things I mentioned, right? The most incompatible people discover they have a basis upon which they can meet. Now we're starting to get healthy, and little by little, the family may see their own defects and admit them. These can then be discussed in an atmosphere of helpfulness and friendliness. I can tell you, unlike David's wife, I am married to a woman in recovery. My wife, Becky, is in her 18th year of recovery. And well, I can tell you this, everything we have is based on our relationships with God and recovery. It really is. We don't go to bed angry. I can't tell you the last time we went to bed angry. We don't have blowout arguments. Now, do we have some arguments? Absolutely. Do we get snippy with each other sometimes? Absolutely. But I can tell you this great technique, this is what David brought up, that I actually got from one of David's sponsees, Minor, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. Minor and her then wife were saying when they get into a bad wife, they stop and they say, let's hold hands and let's pray. And they face each other and they hold hands and they pray. And my wife, Becky, and I were like, oh my God, like that sounds really hard to do, but really amazing. And they were like, yeah, it is really hard to do. And yeah, it's really amazing. And I can tell you that on the few occasions a year that Becky and I begin a nasty argument, and it's a few and far between, and we catch at the beginning, one of us say, hey, let's pray. It is very difficult because our temperature is rising. But I'll tell you, as soon as we grab hands and we stop and we say a little prayer, it is unbelievable how fast the situation gets diffused. There's instant relief, and then we always talk it out. It is amazing because I didn't talk anything out. I was such a bully prior to recovery. I yelled and I screamed and I threatened and I talked and I just ripped into you. There was no talking. There was no compromise, right? Where does this come from? Did I develop this? No. God did this for me. This is the miracle of it, guys. Do not miss this. Please do not miss this.
Yeah, I love that you went there and did that, because that's a challenge for anyone who would like to try that, right? Because the thing is when you're holding hands, you got to look into each other's eyes.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? Yeah,
All
and
right.
it calms that storm internally, and David brought up not the external situation. The internal situation is really the problem.
Yeah.
And I need to change what's inside of me. And then what comes through, not of me, is the power of God. And through her too. And that process, I don't think it could be defeated. I think it's going to be successful every time, because when one or two or more of us are gathered together, I'm going to go biblical on you for a moment. He is present.
The funny conclusion of that story about Minor sharing that technique with me and Becky is every time I'm in a meeting with Minor and I bring that up, after I'm done, she laughs and says, yeah, well, we got divorced, but I'm glad it works for you.
Yes, she did.
Okay, moving on. We are on 99, first full paragraph. After they, the family, after they have seen tangible results, the family will perhaps want to go along. These things will come to pass naturally and in good time, provided, however, the alcoholic continues to demonstrate that he can be sober, considerate, and helpful, regardless of what anyone says or does. Woof! Of course, we all fall much below this standard many times. Why we have a 10 step. But we must try to repair the damage immediately, lest we pay the penalty by a spree. Ab?
I just have penalty, which is punishment for a crime or an offense.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just jump in a couple quick things here, David.
Please.
Yeah. So again, after they've seen tangible results, us getting better, us operating differently, us interacting with them in a healthier way, the family will perhaps want to go along. This is what I was talking about. They may want to join us on our spiritual path, 12-step based recovery, or some other spiritual path of their own, but with the same sort of end goal and motivation, right? So these things will come to pass naturally. So what does that mean naturally? That means versus artificially. That means not by me forcing them, saying, you got to do this, you got to join me. And, it comes as a result of me just living my new recovered life and being that demonstration. It's natural and in good time. What is good time? I don't know. What if it said, and in God's time? Right? Provided. However, so they're going to come around if I can continue to be sober, so that means physically sober, considerate. So continue to be, that means I begin to be considerate and continue to be considerate and helpful. So considerate and helpful were not two of my more obvious characteristics, again, when I got recovered. So if I become considerate and I become helpful and I consistently behave that way, that is going to be very clear demonstration to the people who love me how much I'm changing, that I'm getting out of that self, that plague, that disease of self, the self-centeredness, the selfishness, the self-seeking, all of itself. And it's not only that I continue to be physically sober and considerate and helpful, the combination of which is really recovered, right? When it's all these things, the recovery starts with being sober, but it's so much more than that. But I can continue to demonstrate that regardless of what anyone says or does. So as life comes at me, which life continues to do, I must stay of maximum service to God and the people about me. And the people about me most close are the family. So it's what it's saying is no matter what life throws at me, I must continue to operate the way that God wants me to. Now, it says, of course, we all fall much below this standard many times. That is not a suggestion or a get out of jail free card that says, if you just feel like being a jerk, just be a jerk because we're going to be able to remedy this. No, this is recognizing what we studied in the 10th step. It says, I'm paraphrasing, when I mess up, here's how I deal with it. David already mentioned the whatever, right? The watch, ask, turn, etc. Discuss, amend, and turn. So when I do fall, which I should endeavor not to do, I try to repair the damage immediately. This is, again, 10th step. I have to identify when I messed up and then immediately go to try to remedy that, turn my thoughts, and then make it right. Less, that means otherwise we pay the penalty by a spree. I was on another meeting with I gave a shared on the Zoom like a week ago or something. And this guy, I don't know, he didn't like my message or something happens sometimes. And I don't even know that I talked about this, but he was saying there was nowhere in the book that said if we don't follow the spiritual principles, we're going to drink. And I didn't want to get into it with him, but I'm like, man, it's not what my book says. My book says if I don't get and stay recovered, I'm likely to drink, right? Here's another example. A spree does not mean me skipping through the park. A spree means a drunkenness, a binge, a run. If I don't get and stay tight with God, why is it likely I'm going to get drunk? Because, guys, that's what I did before I got recovered. You don't think I can become unrecovered? I've seen so many people become unrecovered. I can turn my back on God. I don't want to. I hope I never do. But sadly, I've seen other people do this. And we talk about this a lot, right? People who allow themselves to get stuck on the 4th step, people who allow themselves to get stuck on the 9th step, people who never get into those daily disciplines at 10, 11, and 12. They get recovered and then they start to lose that recovery, right? It's very scary. Go ahead, David.
Okay. It says after they have seen tangible, so tangible means real results. Like I have actually changed somehow, some way, somehow inside, internally. The family will perhaps want to go along. That was my experience. Like less fighting in the house, more people wanted to come over. People didn't want to come over to our house. My in-laws never wanted to come over to my house until I got sober. And I actually made a change. And then we became best friends for the very longest time until the passing of my mother, and still to today with my father-in-law, one of my best friends. These things will come to pass naturally in good time provided. However, the alcoholic continues to demonstrate, be an attraction, that he can be sober, like David pointed out. Number one, works a little bit better if you stay sober. Just saying, that seems to be a problem for my wife that I could never stay sober. And then these are the spiritual principles I want to put in place here. I want to put it in, and if you think about what spiritual principles kind of look like, and because of the 4 absolutes that you can read about the 4 absolutes in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. He talks a lot about them, and he refers to them absolutes as a yardstick, and those absolutes are honesty, rigorous honesty, absolute unselfishness, absolute purity, and absolute love. And when I have those things, I use that as my yardstick. Those come from the Oxford group. Tolerance, compassion, patience, forgiveness, humility, goodwill, and love start coming to me more naturally because I'm connected to power. I have access to power. This is about having a spiritual awakening. That's not my how powerful that really is. Could I? And so, who brought that up? My goodness, where was I? I was on a talk somewhere. I don't know what I was listening to, but they brought up like if AA never existed, never ever was like if they fell apart or they never existed, could I have performed somehow or found a spiritual experience to solve my problem on my own? And my answer is absolutely positively not. I needed the 12 principles of Alcoholics Anonymous in my life. And because of that, I want to put them into practice all day long so that I can treat my family better. They deserve that. Think about what I stymied, what I took away, what I stole. I stole their hope all the time. That I would come home on a Friday night and didn't come home till Monday. That I stole the money. That I did all this dishonest stuff in their life. I stole all that hope, and hope was kind of the biggest immoral thing that I possibly could have done. But I also crushed their spiritual conditioning. I didn't allow them to grow spiritually. And if I'm a demonstration, if I'm an attraction to them, they may want what I have. It doesn't mean they have to do what I did either, because this is life or death for this guy, but not so much for them. And I had one experience. Well, I have many experiences, but my wife floored me one time. We were my I'm a non-practicing Jew. My wife is a semi-practicing Catholic. So we raised all our kids Catholic, and I can't remember what the first one is, confirmation, I think you go to. So we had to go to church, and we had to sit in there with the priest and a bunch of people. And the priest asked everyone in the room, who is your spiritual leader in your life? And my wife looked, and I was like 5 years sober, maybe. And she goes, my husband is the most spiritually fit person I know. And I went, holy cow. And then I went to page 84 that night, and I was, or 86, and I was doing my inventory, and I started thinking, but we must be careful not to drift from worry and remorse or moment of reflection. I started drifting into worry and remorse because I don't think any of that was true. I think she needs to find a different person. I started feeling lesser than. I started really getting, like, really beating myself up for it. It motivated me to get closer to God, to do this work better, more than I ever did before. And that was practicing these principles in all my life. Then back to the text, to demonstrate that we can be sober, consider helpful regardless of what anyone says or does, regardless. And then David brought up page 84. We have that inventory that we can do. I'm going to go to it because that's our spot check inventory. That's our 10-step. That's our inventory in the moment. It's on 84 in the second paragraph. I don't like to start paragraphs in the middle, so I'm going to read from the top. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory, right? Personal, pertaining to one's relationship with God, one's relationship with myself, and one's relationship with you. That's what that means to me. And continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along the way. We've done a 4-step. We know we have to set these mistakes as we go along the way. We vigorously, that's an action, commence this way of living as we clean up the past. That's steps 10, 11, and 12. We've entered the world of the spirit, the 4th dimension. So I know what the 3 dimensions of life look like. This is a new dimension of life that I never experienced before, a brand new experience. And I want more and more of it once I tasted it. And this is the next function. So a function, I should expect to do this is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Here's a term that he's using. This is not an overnight matter, meaning that I need to practice this. It should continue for our lifetime. And then these are the spiritual disciplines. Continue, and David brought these up. Watch for what? In my relationship. Doesn't matter if it's just with my wife. I keep using her as an example. I'm talking about, I had a business meeting with a huge hospital I do business with. I brought this in. It was supposed to be an 8-hour beatdown of what I need to change in my business. It was a half-hour meeting, and it was a 2-hour walk around and meet all the executives that I needed to meet to make my business even more successful. That's when God gets brought in. And I didn't do anything dishonest. I didn't manipulate the situation. I just was the child of God, and so is he. And I got to be an agent, and that relationship, it spawned something that I never even thought was possible. I was prepared, like David said, for something bad to happen. at the same time, something great turned out. And that's usually the experience that I get. But my job is to do this with other people. Now that I had that great experience with God, with that human being too, I got to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And these are going to crop up. And what do? Then I ask God at once to remove them. That's my job. This is my practice. And then I discuss them with someone immediately. Hey, David, text you, dude. I did this. I need to talk to you. Give me a call when you get a minute. And he does. Make amends means change internally, quickly if we've harmed anyone. So quickly is another adjective. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. That's a 10. That's a 12 step. And love and tolerance is our code. I need to be reminded of this all the time. Back to the text on page 99, and I'll wrap it up with this. Of course, we all fall much below the standard many times, and not as much as I used to. I'm better at it than I have been before because I'm not asleep dreaming I'm awake. I'm aware of this presence in my life all the time because I invite him in. I invited him in before this Zoom meeting. I invite him in before my Monday Night Live meeting. I'll invite him in before I talk to a sponsee. I'll invite him in before I have a conversation with my wife. I'll invite him in when we have to talk about healthcare for her father because I don't want to make decisions that I don't know. I have no right to be making. She gets to make decisions for her father. But we must repair the damage immediately. And I love what David said here, lest we pay the penalty for a spree. Listen. For me, I have one bad idea from picking up again. One bad idea. If I stop doing this process here, one bad idea, think about it. I got a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual. If I don't stay spiritually fit, I'm in danger. This is really some serious stuff here. This is, and I'm not saying that I walk a tightrope because I do not have to walk a tightrope, and none of us have to walk a tightrope. The road is roomy, it's broad, right? But the thing is, the steps are guardrails, the handrails that I stay inside of all the time. And her cage is the thing. It's like a dimmer switch on the wall. You know, you lean up against it and you raise it up a little by little, and the room gets a little bit brighter. And that's what happens when I work the steps. But when I stop leaning on the switch, and the switch starts going down because of gravity, or I lean on it the wrong way, my light's going out and I'm going to be in big trouble. So I know that if I don't repair this damage immediately, if I just wait, I could pick up a drink today, tomorrow, next month, or a year from now. I don't know when that is because I don't know what suddenly looks like. Good, bro.
Okay. Next paragraph on 99 is another great one here.
Mm-hmm.
If there be divorce or separation, there should be no undue haste for the couple to get together. The man should be sure of his recovery. The wife should fully understand his new way of life. If their old relationship is to be resumed, it must be on a better basis, since the former did not work. This means a new attitude and spirit all around. Sometimes it is to the best interest of all concerned that a couple remain apart. Obviously, no rule can be laid down. Let the alcoholic continue his program day by day. When the time for living together has come, it will be apparent to both parties. Ab?
I have undue and haste. Undue is unnecessary, and haste is swiftness or speed.
So what this is saying is if divorce or separation is out there as a possibility, we don't try to hyper accelerate getting back together as a couple because we may not make it any better. Why should we not rush into this? Well, it says, number one, the man, we'll just say the alcoholic, should be sure of his recovery, right? Make sure he's on the path to recovery, not just say physically sober and that's good enough and grand the wind stop blowing. Also, the wife, partner should fully understand his new way of life and all the commitments that come with it. I'm looking at some people here I know that have partners, spouses. Sometimes it's hard. They don't get it. All right. They don't understand. Oh, you got to go to another meeting. Oh, you got to take another phone call. Oh, you got to go do this and that. Like, can you just stay home, watch a movie? All right. I bet a lot of you guys have had that experience. Right. They don't get it, but they got to understand, and they got to really understand it through the demonstration. This is how I get and stay well. Now let's talk about this next sentence, actually the next two sentences. If their old relationship, so we're going to call it husband and wife, right? Partners, whatever. If that relationship is to be resumed, it must be on a better basis since the former did not work. Okay, that makes sense. There was a relationship, wasn't working. So we need a new way to approach it. How are we going to do that? This means a new attitude and spirit all around. What other relationship are we redefining in our spiritual program recovery because the old one didn't work? How about my relationship with my higher power? Right? So, I'm physically sober. I'm coming to believe I can get sane. I'm making a commitment that I'm going to keep working the steps. I'm doing 1, I'm doing 2, I'm doing 3, I'm getting into the 4th step, right? I had a relationship with God before I got sober, before I got recovered. Guess what it was? I think I'm God. And if there's another God, maybe we're sort of peers on the same level. How did that relationship work out for me? Not well. I ended up here with all you bozos, right? So my old relationship with God didn't work. And I get this a lot. And actually, it's the same thing that Dr. Jung talks to Roland Hazard about, right? And I've had this with guys I've sponsored. I'm like, you got to get to God. You need a new relationship with God. And they're like, oh, I love God. I go to church every weekend. I do this, I do that. And I'm like, how's that working out for you? How's that helping you with drinking and drugging? And they're like, it's not. I'm still drinking. I'm like, dude, it's great that you love God. You need a new relationship with God based on what? A new attitude that I'm going to serve God and mean it, and that I'm going to prove this to God by fulfilling the commitment to work all the steps and then be in his service. New attitude and new spirit all around. This paragraph is saying in the way that I have to reinvent my relationship with God, I might have to reinvent my relationship with my wife. And if you guys didn't know what I was talking about with Dr. Jung and Roland, because I love it, and we go back to 27 so frequently. Hold on. I'm on my iPad here. Let's just go back. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is my favorite page in the book. It's Dr. Jung explaining to Roland Hazard that he has to have a vital spiritual experience. It's the only way he's going to get and stay sober and recovered, right? And so I'm just going to skip to the end. Upon hearing this, that he needs to have a vital spiritual experience, upon hearing this, our friend, it's Roland, was somewhat relieved. For he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. He's like, oh, fantastic. I'm a parson, whatever. I go, I sing hymns, I maybe jam on the organ a little, right? This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. Fantastic if you have an appreciation of God. Fantastic if you belong to organized religion and you're into it. Fantastic the opportunity you now have to redefine the relationship, because if you had the right relationship in the first place with God through your religion or your spirituality, whatever it was, you wouldn't have shown up here. You wouldn't be reading the big book with us, and you wouldn't need 12-step recovery. And this is why there are some people who do get sober, not through 12-step recovery. They do it through church. They do it through other means. God bless, no monopoly on it. Whatever works. I totally support you. But for most of us, drunks and drug addicts and compulsive overeaters and sex addicts and the rest, we need this structure. We need help to redefine our relationship with God. And God bless. We're here to help each other. It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, David. Great job. And so if there's a divorce or separation, there should be no undue haste for the couple to get together. The man should be sure of his recovery. I'm not going to talk about the first sentence because I'm not a marriage counselor. I have no idea what he's supposed to do. I'm going to tell him to go to God, go get some counsel from someone who knows how to either repair a marriage, and then you got to go to your wife or husband or your partner. But this one here, the man should be sure of his recovery. What does that mean? That means spiritual change. Does that mean just go to meetings? No. That means I work these steps. That means that I help others. I get out of self. I get out of self by helping others. That's how I be sure of my own recovery. How can I possibly be sure of my own recovery? I don't give everything that I have away to someone else. And then it says the wife should fully understand his new way of life. If the old relationship is to resume, it must be on a better basis since the former did not work. That's kind of obvious. This means what? A new attitude and spirit all around. I think that's for both parties. And I can't do her part.
Hmm.
So for my part, let's bounce around the book and go to page 55. Well, let's go to the appendix 2 first, because it talks about attitude. It's on page 570. It says, we can only be defeated by an attitude of what? Intolerance or belligerent denial. It's only two things we can be defeated by, to have that better attitude. And then on the page 55 of our book, in the fourth paragraph, so we're going to be talking about here, it says, we can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, all my old thinking, my old ideas, enables me to think honest, to seek God, encourage you to search diligently inside, within yourself. Then if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. Broad highway. Let the testimony of other people show you their 12th step. That's what the guy did for me when I got sober. His testimony of his 12th step showed me that he had a better life than I did, and I wanted what he had. With this attitude, you cannot fail. Dude, that's a promise. You have a better attitude. Personality change sufficient enough to recover from the disease of alcoholism. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. That comes from a power greater than myself. So back to the text here on page 99, correct? Yeah. Sometimes it's best interest of all concerned that a couple remain apart. Again, I'm not a marriage counselor. I have no idea what you're supposed to do. Obviously, no rule can be laid down. No rules in AA. Bill just said it. No rule. Let the alcoholic continue his program day by day. Yeah. I have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition today, day by day. I don't stay sober one day at a time, but I do practice these principles one day at a time. When the time for living together has come, it will be apparent to both parties. God's will be done. God's will be done. That's my prayer. That will be done, God. That's my job. That's it. You know, I wrecked a lot of stuff. I don't know why my wife stayed, and I got to tell you, I don't know if I would have stayed if she would have done that to me. It was so dishonest the way I lived my life. I don't know if I could have, you know. So just like Lois with Bill, strong woman in my life that I have to make amends to her. And I'm not saying apology, right? I've brought this up before in the past. I don't ever say I'm sorry to my wife, ever. I say I was wrong for having a tone with you. I was wrong being short with you. I was wrong taking your inventory. I was wrong for not being thoughtful of you. What can I do to repair this? What can I do to fix this? That's my language today. It's different because I mean it. I want it to be different. I want to have my poor wife. We've been married. We just had 34 years to marriage, and if I don't screw this thing up in a couple of weeks, I'll have 25 years of sobriety. I'm not saying all 25 years of sobriety has been bliss by any means. I'm saying by the grace of God, we have 34 years of marriage. And by the grace of Karen, we have 34 years of marriage. And I still have a lot of improvement to do here. But the thing about it is when I invite God in, all things are possible. My poor wife today, and I mean this in the most respectful way. I can hardly keep my hands off of her. And I mean that in the most respectful way. I like to hold her hand. I like to look into her eyes. I like to, dude, she came, like, just gave you the Charlie Parker story with Katie, and she got her hair done. I love when my wife gets her hair done. And it wasn't because of Katie Parker story. Like, I knew what time she was going to be home today. So I got up super early this morning so I could meet her in the driveway. So I was there before her, and I backed my truck and trailer in, and she came in, and I was waiting for her because I couldn't wait to see her hairdo. I love it. Dude. I can't explain it. I can just tell you, God has gave me more love in my life than I know what to do with. So my job is to give it away, you know, and try to be a good demonstration and attraction to my kids. You know what I watch my kids do with their husbands and with their children? Those things. Wow, we broke the cycle of alcoholism in my family and drug addiction and selfishness and self-centeredness. Break that cycle. Like when I watch my kids interact, act with their husbands, when I watch them interact with their kids, like I wish I was that good at what they do. It seems like it's natural for them. Like I have to be conscious to do that. Like that doesn't come natural to me. Why? Page 62. I'm selfish and self-centered. I don't think beyond myself.
Okay, let's continue. Bottom of 99.
Okay.
Bill's doubling down. Let no alcoholic say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. Right. So just pause in there. I just want to take you back to the paragraph before. Started with if there be divorce or separation. Now he's saying let no alcoholic say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. This just isn't so. In some cases, the wife will never come back for one reason or another. Remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon people. It's dependent upon his relationship with God. We've seen men get well whose families have not returned at all. We've seen others slip when the family came back too soon. Yep.
Sorry. I just have dependent, which is relying on something else for support.
Okay.
Good.
So let no alcohol. Okay. Are you all right with that? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have a friend, David and I do, Mark B. And he never got back with his wife, but he told his sponsor when he first got sober, he's like, I got to have my wife back. There's no way I can function without her. He says, you can get sober, wife or no wife.
Yeah.
And if we didn't know that came out of the book, like we all came in around the same time. He didn't know, like his sponsor like was pretty savvy with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I was like, oh, that guy's brilliant, right? And he is. But the thing is like it says there, let no alcoholics say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. This just isn't so. I put nonsense right above that. It isn't so. In some cases, the wife will never come back for one reason or another. And the reasons are, there's a multitude of reasons. Remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon other people or my home group or my sponsor or my friends or my job or my neighbors or my mom or my dad. Pretty clear. He doesn't say it. I'm going to give you a run on what I think. What is it dependent upon? Next sentence. Bills tells us the problem, always tells us the solution is dependent upon his relationship with God. All my relationships are based upon that. Every single one of my relationships are based upon my relationship with God first. Wife, kids, strangers, sponsees. Dude, I invite them in. I'm aware of it. I'm awake to it. I have access to it. Why wouldn't I do it and practice it? We have seen men get well whose families have not returned at all. We have seen others slip when the family came back too soon. Means there was no change. That's what happened. So one brief story. I don't know. Hopefully it's brief, and I got to share this because it's God.
We're good.
So I got a guy I've been working with for 3 years, Carlos. David knows him very well too. He took over our big book study that we were doing live. I mean, 3 years over and killing it, like really good with the big book, right? Does all the studying, Mark Houston and Joe Hawk and everybody, really good at the big book. But he's got a job that takes him out of town for months at a time sometimes, so he can't do the big book stuff. So he called me, and he has no relationship with his kids. He's been sober 3 years, hasn't had a relationship with the kids for 5 years. All grown children, men, right? 3 kids. And I said to him, I think it's time for you to write a kindly letter and give it to your sister and ask your sister to give it to your son if he'll read it. And he procrastinated and he didn't want to do it. I said, dude, you got to do it. You're out of town. This is the perfect opportunity for you to get on your knees and have God help you write the letter. 1 paragraph, brief and short, just whatever you need to write. And he says, okay, I'm going to do it. A week goes by, 2 weeks go by. He hasn't done anything. Sitting in remorse, reflection. This is never going to work. So he's out of town. It's the end of the day. He puts his sweat clothes on. He's going to go to the gym that he belongs to. It's even out of town. They must have a chain of them down there. And something came into his head and he goes, I think I should go back and write that letter right now. My sponsor told me to write. So he went back and got on his knees, got out a piece of paper, got out a paper and pencil. And right when he started to write his son's name, which is Carlos Jr., his son texted him. Dude, he hasn't spoke to his son in 5 years. Is that odd or is that God?
Jeez.
See, what happens there in that moment is when crack the door of willingness open and I walk through it, God shows up. It's all about the willingness. He was willing to do the work finally, and the result was God showed up. Now, I'm not saying to repair the damage that's been done, but I'm saying the door's open now. And now there's a possibility to have a relationship with me again.
Opportunity.
5-year absence, right? Opportunity, right? Presented itself because the door of willingness was slammed shut. And when he opened the door and cracked it and opened it up and walked through it, that's not, I didn't come up with this brilliant stuff. This isn't the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is my experience with when I do the work here. And God showed up. And when he told me that story, he was crying and I was crying.
Yeah.
Tears of joy. Beautiful stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's incredible. So big finish here, right? Let no alcoholic say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. So Bill is disarming us of all these illusions that I have to have my family, I have to have my kids, like Dave was just talking about with Carlos, that I have to have my wife, that I have to have my job, that I have to have my house, that I need to have a certain amount of income. Bill's saying, no, 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 no. None of that human and material stuff is going to get or keep me recovered. It just isn't so. In some cases, a wife will never come back for one reason or another. We mentioned our buddy Eddie a bunch of times. His marriage has fallen apart and got recovered and they're starting to get back together maybe. And then he got cancer real bad, like 18 months. And his wife stuck through him through all the treatments and he got healthy, got through that. And then they couldn't make the marriage work. But you know what? Did it with grace. He said, this is what God decided, right? It's such a beautiful thing. Sometimes the wife, the husband, the partner, the spouse just doesn't come back, guys, right? Despite all of our wishes and our desires. Remind the prospect, his recovery is not dependent upon people. This is one of the first critical things that we learn in the doctor's opinion. Human reliance fails us. My reliance on myself and reliance on other people. So if human reliance fails me in my sickness, human reliance is going to fail me in my recovery. I've got to have God recovery. It's dependent not just upon God either. I should requalify that. This is perfectly here. It's dependent upon my relationship with God. My relationship with God that I have to establish or reestablish and grow. It's more than maintain. Got to grow it. Seen men get well. His families have not returned at all. Many, many. We mentioned Eddie. We mentioned Carlos. Many other people we've known over the years. We've seen others slip when the family came back too soon. Why? Because I got physically sober. I stopped drinking. Ain't it grand? The wind stopped blowing. I got mama let me back in the house. And David, like David said, we got from our buddy Babe. She let me make the border crossing in the bed, right? Oh, I got the job back. I got a couple of bucks in my pocket. So I got everything I lost. I got the wife and the money back. What else do I need? A whole lot more.
Sure.
All right, good spot to stop. I'm going to kill the recording. We'll pick up at top of 100 next week.
Mm-hmm.